Hello Exiles, and today I'm going to be giving you a rundown of the new interview that has just happened with Zizaran and Jonathan Rogers, which I'm going to run through. There has been quite a lot discussed, so I will go through that in a second. Before we get there, this weekend I am going to be streaming all weekend on Twitch, so if you want to come and join me, there is my Twitch handle. My link is in the description, so throw us a follow and come join me. For anyone else, if you are wanting to watch me on YouTube, then throw us a subscribe, hit that bell, and you will get notified. And finally, we are getting close to the final few days for the early access, so if you do want to be in with a chance of winning, then you will need to obviously watch the video that's in the description below. Good luck to everybody, and keep an eye out on Thursday because I will be posting a new video with all of the winners for the early access key giveaway. With that being said, let's jump into the content. So today, Zizaran had a very long interview with Jonathan Rogers, and he went through an absolute metric ton of information. As it says on the interview, there was 21 major points that he did go through. There is an extra 4 that I am going to discuss, but I wouldn't class them as major, so we will come back to that at the end. I'm going to run through these as quick as possible, so just bear with me, but we got a lot to get through, so let's begin. So the first thing that he wanted to discuss and was discussed was regards to tabs. Now he did ask what's going to happen to all of the tabs that we currently have that are related to league content that is not going to be in Path of Exile 2 on launch. And basically, Jonathan stated that they will stay, they will not be moving over to Path of Exile 2. They will stay as their actual tab. So for example, if we just pick the Blight tab, for example, he did say that you will not get a tab for that specific tab, because he has plans in the future to be able to bring that content back. So that means that in essence, he did kind of confirm that Blight will be returning at some point in the future. As and when, we have no idea. They may also need to rework the reward system because the oil system has now been changed and it's now all based around the distilled emotions. So there is potentially a complete rework of Blight that potentially will be coming in the future. Next thing he discussed was target dummies. He did mention that he is not opposed to the idea. He said, but the main thing that he was concerned about it was, what do? Do you add armor to the dummy? Can you add resists to the dummy? That would then create an entire new UI that they would have to build. And at the end of the day, Zizaran said no, just a base dummy that literally has no resist, no armor, we would be happy with. Jonathan did go on to state that he would not be opposed to that and he would be more than happy to add that in, but just not at the moment. They then carried on to discuss about bosses, and he said that you are not able to portal out of a boss fight. You are literally banned from portaling out of a boss fight. He also said that you cannot swap gear in the middle of a boss fight. Now, most people may not have noticed this, but on some builds, people have been known to swap gear mid-fight. You are now not allowed to do that, so you cannot cheese the boss fight. However, he did then go on to say that if you do go into a boss fight, let's say you're in hardcore mode and it is a little bit difficult, then you are able to log out and go back to checkpoint and just not enter the boss arena. But he did say that if you do Alt F4, it will literally remove you, and then when you log back in again, it will put you back at the exact same position in the middle of the boss room. That is to ensure that nobody can basically cheese a fight. But if you are struggling to do the fight, you can literally just click log out and log out to restart at checkpoint. Now, one of the biggest takeaways and one of the massive things that he did say is that they have now added in what's called a instance pause, which is based on lag. He said that if your instance hits 100 milliseconds, the entire instance will automatically pause for you, which is massive for hardcore players, because if you lose internet, it's pretty much a death sentence. But it's also a good thing for softcore, because if you gain any form of lag, internet latency issues, then your game will pause and you shouldn't die, which is always going to be a good thing. He did then go on to talk about separate names and the fact that the naming system is very similar to how it is in PoE 1, and that you cannot have the same user having the same name. So basically, if you want to have a specific name, then you are going to have to be the first to get it. So be quick in typing those names in. Next thing was discussed was overriding runes. Now, he said currently there is no way to override runes, but again, he said he is not opposed to discussing it, and that he wanted to have a discussion with Rishi and Mark to see whether they would be happy to change it. And Zizaran brought up a very good point, mentioning that imagine you see the best item on the trade site, however, there is runes that are socketed in it, which are absolutely garbage. You basically just ruin the entire item, which is a very good point. So he stated that runes are very strong early campaign, When you get to late game, end game, runes are possibly not that strong, and that you are more going to be focused on trying to get soul cores, and as they are connected to a lot of player power. And he stated that there are also some very strong divine style rare soul cores which you will be looking for to try and get on your gear. The next thing he does discuss is Mana Leech. He does say that on Mana Leech there is only available for attacks, and that they have removed Mana Leech for spells. So if you are wanting to try and build a build for Mana Leech on spells, then unfortunately it is dead. Unlucky. They then go on to discuss crit, and he does say that is it more of a reliance within Path of Exile 2 to try and get to 100% crit, and Jonathan disagreed and said no, because the trade-off you are sacrificing to try and get to 100% crit, you are going to be sacrificing too much, and it's not necessarily needed. Which kind of makes me think that you are not going to need that much damage when it comes to PoE 2 to be able to do a substantial amount of damage, and you're not going to have to get to 100% crit, which then does make me think that if you do get to 100% crit, then you are going to be doing a lot of damage. But it's a bit of swings and roundabouts. You either go for 100% crit and you're going to be really, really squishy, or you go for medium amounts of crit and you could be quite tanky. That is entirely your decision. He very briefly touched on rare items, and tier 5 rare items he said are rarer than hen's teeth. I have never heard that term before, but I'm going to assume that they are very, very, very rare, and you may potentially need to add a bit of rarity maybe onto your gear to try and get that. That is going to be the chase items, is trying to get some tier 5 rare items, because they're the ones that have got the best rolls. He did also mention that there are some tier rolls that just won't roll on these items based on the actual tier of the item, which is really, really good, and it'll exclude an entire mod pool, which is pretty amazing. They very briefly touched on crit mechanics in terms of bosses, and he said that they are looking to potentially doing it so that crit boss mechanics are based on per projectile, or that's how it should work, but he was going to discuss it with Mark because he wasn't quite sure on how it works in terms of does each projectile roll the dice on whether it's going to be a crit or not. He just did not know. So with that element, basically, potentially there could be crit mechanics based on the bosses. We just won't know until we get into the game and until we get a bit more in-depth playtime in early access. The next one is they discussed support bots / Aurabots, and he stated that their potentially Aurabots are going to be dead in terms of Path of Exile 2. He said you will not have a character that will literally just be reserving all of their mana, running around doing nothing. You will either have them supporting you in some way by removing armor, debuffing the monsters, maybe freezing time like a Chronomancer. You'll actually be having to actively do something to help the other player, so you're not going to literally just be running around buffing them all the time and doing nothing. He then went on to discuss map mods and stated that they do not affect the loot from the map. Similar to how an 8 mod map would influence the juice in PoE 1, he did state that in PoE 2, the modifiers don't affect the drops. He said, and he was quite certain on that, and he said that it's going to be quite fun to see what people roll on maps to try and get them, because there is 3 positive and 3 negative mods. It's a bit of a swings and roundabouts situation. You're going to have to see what mod you get, but it doesn't matter how many mods you get. He seemed to say that it doesn't affect the loot from the drops. They discussed Ascendancy in terms of special skills. So I did a video recently where they stated that obviously your Infernal skill for the Infernal Hound for the Infernalist, and any skill that is based to an Ascendancy, you can then support. What they then queried was, does that necessarily join you on your skill screen as a 5-socketed item? And Jonathan basically states no. Skill will level up based on what level you are, and it will gain more sockets as you level up, and he believes that once you hit 80 and above, you will then get 5 sockets, and it's more based on character level and progression. They went on to confirm that low life has now gone back to 35%, back to how it used to be. Basically, there were some changes that made that it was at 50%, but now it's gone back to 35%, so that is obviously implemented for Path of Exile 2. He was asked whether we're going to see Ascendancies shown before the launch, and he basically was unsure and said that he didn't seem opposed to it, but he would need to discuss it with the community. Zizaran literally did a poll while they were in the interview, and 77% wanted to see the Ascendancies before early access launch. So let's just hope that we get to see that before early access. He then went on to discuss towers and stated that all of the towers, you can only use them once. So you can only use 1 tablet per tower, and that is basically it. So you want to try and make sure that you juice the tablet as much as possible, because once you've used it, that tower is then redundant. He then touched on servers, and he said that he is not confident in terms of the servers and whether they're going to survive, but he said that they have set out for 1 million server instance capacities because he feels that they are not going to exceed that. However, he does know that they have spoke to the cloud partners for servers, and if it does exceed 1 million, then there are obviously contingencies in place to be able to extend that, to make sure that they do have enough numbers to be able to play effectively without any issues. He was asked about Exilecon, and he stated that they did actually originally intend to have an Exilecon next year for 2025. However, with the fact that they're going to be focusing so much on trying to get 1.0 finished, and Exilecon is a hell of a lot of work with organizing the place, making sure that everything's ready, doing the whole keynote speech, making sure that they have all the technology and all of the information, and even all of the set design and everything that's required. He said it's just too much to try and organize at the same time as trying to do the 1.0 release. He did state that if they had infinite resources, then yes, he would have done it next year, and it would have been the perfect marketing opportunity to have an Exilecon right before the 1.0 release, but he said it's just too much work. They then go on to discuss the fact that the one death boss fights are implemented for the entire game. So basically, if you walk into the pinnacle boss at the end of the end game and he then hits you with one shot and you die, then you are going to have to then farm up those keys again to be able to get back to the pinnacle boss again. There is no 6 portals. It is a case that if you die, that is it. It is done. And that is across all of the pinnacle bosses across the game and pretty much all of the maps as well. And finally, the last point is that we asked about preload. Are we going to be able to have a preload for the 112 gig early access? And he stated that the only issues that he had with it was data mining, and that is the only reason why he's held off giving it away, because he knows that people are going to be data mining it. However, he said he needs to discuss it because he knows that people will need to download it, and people's internet, and people don't usually have the best internet. So he is conscious of that, and he is going to discuss it with the team and decide what he wants to do for preloading. So to answer the question of preload, pre-download, we don't know. And that is basically it in terms of the 21. I'm now going to run through the 4 bonus points, which he did run through. So he did munch on to say that there is a new mode in the settings menu. So people usually use lockstep and predictive in game, which obviously helps with freeze and lag and all that type of stuff. He did say that there is a new mode called hybrid, which is in the middle of lockstep and predictive, but it still does freeze your game if there is any issues server side, but he said it is a hell of a lot better. He very briefly touched on the fact that there is no orb of regrets and everything is based on gold. I already knew this, but it was good to obviously have a confirmation of that. So there is no orb of regrets, and everything in terms of respecing your tree is based on gold. He also mentioned that player rarity is multiplicative with the map rarity. He said as it is in PoE 1. And finally, guild tabs are not being ported over. So as we know, guilds are not obviously being transferred from PoE 1 to PoE 2. He did say that all of the tabs are in the same boat. So if you are currently in a guild and you have bought multiple guild tabs, then you will need to buy them again until they have transferred everything across from PoE 1. How long is that going to take? I have no idea. That is based on how long they have got to do and how much of a big of a job it is to transfer everything across. And that is basically it, guys. I've tried to do it as quickly as I can because there was a lot of information, and I've tried to condense it in as much detail as possible just so that you could understand what has been discussed. Other than that, guys, if you are still here, thank you for watching, and until the next video, keep an eye out over the next couple of days because I am going to be posting some more videos for juicing your waystones and some content in regards to the end game. Then keep an eye on my channel, and thank you for watching, and until the next video, stay sane.